Recording right here. Oh, thanks. Welcome to Backward Design Forward Thinking. I'm Addie Tolliver. I am subbing in for Kendall. Well, Kendall is actually technically in the meeting, but she's in virtually. And we're going to be talking about backward design, which is a tried and true course design methodology that we tend to recommend to faculty a lot because it's just an easy way to think about organizing your course. And when you think about like designing your courses, like what do you usually like have in mind? Like, have you ever designed a course from scratch? How about that? You haven't seen like the heads are like shaking now. Okay. So let me tell you what usually happens in academia. So one of the things that people don't talk about, right, is that a lot of people go into teaching and go into the academic profession, but they don't have any background into teaching, right? They don't have any pedagogical training. They are experts in their field, so they're, experts in physics, biology, chemistry, but all the times they don't have any training to teach those things, and they tend to just model what people do. And same thing with course design. Like very seldom you have take a course on how to design a course, right? And what people do is just they model what other people have done to them, or they might join in and then say, oh, you're going to be teaching this class that this other professor has been teaching. They just give you a syllabus and you basically modify the syllabus that somebody else has put together for you. And it's normally how it's been done, but we know that there are better ways of doing things, particularly if you're going to do something from scratch. You can also implement this backward design to tweak a course that you get, from another faculty member and just revise and see if there's alignment between what the objectives are for the course to the current things that are being required from the students. So, a little bit about the CT and what we do. Because faculty don't usually have training in pedagogy, we provide training for faculty. We also help them with course design. We help them make sure that the activities they're planning for the course are aligned with the objectives for the course. So that's one of the support services that we provide for those that have not had that training. Then for today's session, we're going to be, talking about course design process, even though you have no experience. So I guess we can skip through that. But we can talk about the benefits of intentional course design. And then we are going to draft a course we're going to work together. It's not going to be a full course, but we're going to go navigate through the steps of the backward design process to pretend that we have a little course. Of course, it's really challenging to do it in 50 minutes, particularly if we're not using AI. You are on the AI assisted session. I think that it will be a lot easier if AI is helping us, but we're going to navigate through it and talk about the importance of this methodology. So here you go. Now, Vala, you are a graduate student, so you've been in school for a hot minute. Think about a time that you had like a well-designed course and what made it a well-designed. Like, what do you remember from that experience? It was like, okay, that was a good experience and it was well-designed. And I'll give you a minute. And then Kendall, since you are online, also think of an experience of a course that was well-designed. And actually, because I'm using Canva, I'm going to give you 1 minute and then how about you share? Let me pick from the audience. Yeah. Actually, let me give you also the microphone because then the folks online and then the recording. Here, just put it. Okay, thank you.
Oops. Okay, I think it's working.
Yep.
So I could think like two courses. One of them was, I think, well designed, but one is really not well designed. It's like the totally opposite side of it.
Excellent. Those are memorable. They tend to be
Yes,
memorable.
exactly. So, like for the not well-designed one, it wasn't a course about like algorithms that, the entire process was like, you learn about any algorithm, but it was like theoretically you are like prove that this is good, this is bad, this is like convergence fast or slow or something like this. But those all were like on the papers,
Uh-huh.
and you need to write it like in a step one, step two, step three. It was like the course, like educating parts. But the other part, like I really don't understand anything from the course because they're all
Oh.
numbers, mathematical like formulation and things stuff. But once I have like we had like one or two homeworks, which is actually asked us to implement these ones on the some programming language softwares like I don't know Python or something like this. Once I try to apply it, like I do a lot of like try and errors. I use like different sources to learn what is exactly doing, and
Uh-huh.
then I just really learned it. So I think it's not really well designed because it was just talking about the theory. If there weren't any homeworks, I would be like do nothing. And
Yeah.
it was supposed to be like I don't know 10 homeworks, like one homework per almost a week, but we ended up with 3 homeworks.
Hmm.
So I couldn't learn that much, from homeworks either. And then we had like course project, final exam, due dates. Nothing was like, known and certain.
Oh.
So I was like stressed that should I start it now? I couldn't like, manage my
You
time
couldn't manage your
organized.
time. Yeah.
Yes, because I don't know, because I have other courses as well. I have my research. I need to,
Yeah.
kind of, and I have another life. So I need to like kind of balance everything, but without knowing anything, it was like, really, really
So you needed structure, and there was absolutely no structure to
exactly.
it. Yeah. Understandable.
So the well-designed one, it was like exactly in the opposite side. So it was like in a course lecture within a lab assignment every week about the lecture that we had. We had like
Mm-hmm.
1 week to think. But the best part, I think it was like you need to prepare the for the question, but the question was general. You can be able to just modify the question by yourself. You can choose different data sets. So there was
Mm-hmm.
like instructor, you should use this one and every answer should be exactly the same. So you can go like
So it's
different
pretty broad, and
ways.
you pick kind of the
Exactly.
examples that fit your interests, kind of. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that was like really interesting for me because it makes me like I think it was like the very first time in entire my life that I really interested in doing some homeworks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was really good, and like everything was structured as well. But
Yeah.
the best part was having lab assignments that you can choose your own that what you want to do. But like general idea was the same, but like the path you want to go to reach that goal was different. And
Okay.
I think that makes it like really well designed course.
Makes a lot of sense. How about you, Kendall? Do you have some experiences to share?
I took a history seminar um where like the goal of the class was to write an article length, original work that was of a high enough quality to get published in a journal,
Mhm.
right? So the first 6 weeks we read a monograph, a historical monograph each week, and then wrote like a 1 to 2,000 page response where we had to talk about not just the content but also the writing style and the structure of the piece. And then the rest of the semester was just for drafting, peer writing workshops, and revision. So we ended up getting and giving feedback from every single person. So by the time I completed that paper, I had gone through probably 10 sessions of revision or versions, right?
Yeah.
And that paper is now being published in a journal. So I felt like it was, of course, with these seminars, especially for humanities, they always want you to come out with a seminar paper that you can turn into an article, but they don't necessarily always give you the time to write and revise and practice, right? Or also to think about the structure of academic writing in addition to like the content of the text that you're reading. So I thought this course was really well designed because if your objective is to get a really good paper out of it, something that's worthy of publication, well, then I think you really do need to give students in class time to work on
Yeah.
writing skills.
So there was clear alignment between the expectations of the objectives of the course and all the activities that the course required you to do.
Exactly.
Felt like you were not wasting time by doing the activities that were being required of you. Um, well, thank you for sharing. So do you remember how long ago that class was? And even your experience, do you remember how long ago? Oh, last semester. So it's fresh. How about yours, Kindle? Do you remember how long?
I took that history seminar, I think my second year, so it's been 4 years now.
Okay, so it's been a while that made a significant impact.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, well, let's see here. Okay, so when you think about instruction, right, and the different stages of what it takes to put together a class, you need to have the subject matter knowledge, right, as the instructor, and you need to work on the instructional design. But you also have to plan the instructor-student interactions, the course management, all that stuff should happen before the beginning of instruction. So those are things that you need to keep in mind. Ideally, you want to design your course before you go into the classroom and before you're in front of the students. That is even more important and true if you're teaching an online course. We're talking about like a face-to-face course here, but design of an online course is even more important that everything is designed ahead of time so that whenever the course goes live, you can really focus on your interactions with students and not so much the course content. Same thing for face-to-face instruction. If you can have most of the stuff done ahead of time, that once is go time, you can only focus on just providing the best feedback that you can have, and timely feedback, which is really important. Do that now. So this is a quote from this book from Fink, was like creating significant learning experience, right? We can find ways to identify and create learning experiences that students and others can agree are truly significant. We have made important progress in higher education. So this book, Fink's book, is pretty a big one in the instructional design world. And they're talking about creating these significant learning experiences. And there are some things specifically that make them significant. And it's about the process, right? Like those are activities that can be engaging and high energy. The students are connected, the students are not bored by them. And then the important part is that there's lasting change. So like Kendall mentioned, like the course that she took that was a good design course was 4 years ago. So she still remembers something that was 4 years ago. So it has made a lasting change, but also they see the value in life. So there's another example, right? Like you have the articles for publication. So all the work that was done there can be, submitted article publication, can be in her CV, can add to her marketability as she goes into academia. So those are definitely characteristics of these significant learning experiences. So as you are designing your course, you want to try it as much as possible, creating these significant learning experiences. Now, the model for the backward design, you were at the AI assisted course design session, so you probably are familiar with this already, but there are three biggest steps where you first are going to identify the desired result. So you're going to be thinking, okay, at the end of this course, or 5 years from the time that the students have taken this course, what are the main things that I want my students to be able to do or know? And those are the things that you need to figure out first, and that will guide your whole course design process. Then you are going to determine the acceptable evidence that will show to you that the students are meeting these objectives. So you have those objectives, you're going to be thinking about basically your assessment strategies, like what are going to be assigning your students, what activities, what projects or homeworks, how are you going to evaluate, or what are the things that they will do to you that you can evaluate them to see if they're meeting those objectives, right? So that's that second step. And then you're going to plan the learning experiences and the instruction based on that. So there's a process that you're going to be looking at. How many weeks am I teaching? What are the topics that I'm covering? Like, let's break them down and let's populate them. And then you can be even more granular and repeat that by weekly modules or by class sessions, depending on the term that you're teaching. And, if it is a fall term, if it's a summer term, those are completely different course design structures, right? Because you're teaching a class in the summer, you're probably going to be spending a lot of time in class with your students. You might create plans for each of the sessions as if you were, doing a whole week on a regular fall or spring semester. So those are the steps basically. So we have a little bit of practice here. So we're going to go through these steps and we're going to pretend that we are teaching a freshman 101 course. Let me see. Oh, bummer. Let me see if I wanted to see if there's a marker here because we were going to use the freaking thing, but the markers are gone. So I'm going to try to fetch a marker in the other class. So basically, Yeah, we'll look at the drawers. We're going to be looking at a freshman 101 class, and that is a 4-week summer course on freshman success. Is there anything there? Huh. Okay. Oh, great. That's okay. I will use this and we'll kind of play around with this. I would just open a Word document. Oh, you know what? I know what I'm gonna do. I have a doc cam here. We're gonna full on doc cam it out. Look at this. Ingenuity. Ingenuity, Vala. So, okay. So we have this Fresh 101. It's a 4-week summer course on freshman success. So imagine like as you are an incoming freshman student, what are the things that you need to do? We're going to be designing this freshman success course. And they're, incoming and transfer students. So like lower level students, so we can figure out together what are the things that students need to know. So the very first step, right? We're going to identify the desired results. So we need to come up with 3 to 5. Generally, when we talk about overall learning objectives, we usually do like 3 to 5 of them. That's plenty. They're overall umbrella topics. Now, if you're not familiar, there's this thing when you think about, oh, we need to create smart objectives. It's not that we're thinking about smart and dumb objectives, even though some objectives are just smarter than others. What we talk about is that there is this acronym, is that they should be specific, they should be measurable, they should be attainable, relevant, and time-based. So a lot of the times, like it's kind of confusing to have the time-based one, but you can say at the end of this course, students should be able to. That already shows the time-based. It's like during duration, you're going to learn these things. They should be relevant, of course, to the subject matter. There should be things that students should be able to do. So if it gets to the point that you're looking at all the activities and content that you're covering and it's not aligning with these, then you should scratch them off. The other thing is one of the resource that can be really, really, really helpful whenever you're putting together these objectives is the Bloom's taxonomy. So Bloom's taxonomy, this one is the cognitive one, can be an excellent resource. But if you just Google Bloom's taxonomy cognitive and go into the Google images, you're going to find a bunch of other tables that will give you all of these action verbs. So to the right of the triangle, those are action verbs that relate to the triangle. So if you look at the triangle, the things that are the bottom part are the things that require the least amount of cognitive engagement with the content. So remembering something, understanding something, applying usually are lower on the cognitive totem pole, basically. But the further up you go, when you're talking about analyzing, evaluating, creating, normally you need to have that base of remembering, understanding, and applying to be able to do those things. So as you are developing the objectives for the freshman 101 course or any course that you're teaching, you need to think about having a good balance of higher cognitive things, but also you could include some of the lower cognitive things. We tend to, for the overall objectives, if you think about, 5 years down the road from the course is over, sometimes we want to have more of the higher level cognitive engagement action verbs because you can be a little more granular for specific sessions. For this example, each session you can be more granular about what the students will be able to do at the end of each class day that is going to be a longer class day. Or in a fall course, you will be able to say at the end of this week, you should be able to do this and this and this. So you can select some of the higher level ones. So, but you see here, design, assemble, construct, appraise, differentiate. Those are things that can be measurable. If you create an assignment or activity, you can ask them to do these things. We tend to, we have to avoid saying at the end of this course you should be able to know or you should be able to understand, because you can't really see if somebody's knowing or understanding. Like somebody can do this, but they could be just doing this with their heads. So if they're explaining something to you, it is more likely that you'll be able to evaluate if their explanation is meeting the overall objectives, or if they're getting it right. And if they explain it wrong, then they're not meeting the objectives. You can provide them with feedback. Same thing if they're are not able to describe something properly, then you know that they don't know, and you know that they don't understand, right? So instead of saying, of course, we want them to know and understand, but try to be a little more specific and use like an action verb that is a little more measurable. It's a little smarter, right? So, so let's think about that. So let's think of our course, and let me see if I can do the, can I do the, no, Blackjack PC. I'm trying to do the doc cam, and it was on earlier, but of course, now that I want to do it, camera control, nope. Okay, I think we're gonna have to keep that off. We'll just like work together and even the thing is gone here from my. Okay, let's just figure out right now. Let's think about a freshman success course. Using some of these action verbs, what are some objectives that you think will be relevant for those students? At the end of this course, students should be able to do what?
I was thinking something like evaluating a syllabus to
Sure.
understand, you know, what's being asked of you and to come up with like a study plan so that you can have realistic expectations for the workload and the time commitment of a class.
So instead of evaluating, should be able to maybe uh, interpret a syllabus potentially. Do you think interpreting
Yeah,
a
that
syllabus?
sounds good.
Um, so at the end of this course, students should wait. What happened to the? Did you just see that?
Yeah.
I, I, I. What the heck? No, I don't know what happened. Was that an egg that just broke on the screen? I just pressed a couple buttons here, but I don't even know which buttons there were. Okay, so the end of the course, I'm gonna put it in the chat here in Zoom, so that's the way I'm gonna keep track. Students should be able to interpret a collegiate syllabus. I guess that's a good one, right? Interpret a collegiate syllabus. What else? They will be able to
I think something about like effective communication, right,
yes.
with faculty. I also think maybe something about like assessing resources and figuring out which resources are applicable to particular, you know, things in their life in the classroom.
So how about communicate effectively with faculty and support service staff? How about identify support services
Mhm.
that can be helpful in their academic journey?
Including things like office hours and like research librarians and stuff like that, right?
And then how about create a schedule or something, or
Yeah.
manage their time, or we'll develop a schedule, uh, develop a schedule or time management strategy. So think about like time management is something that is challenging for freshman students, right? Like if they haven't done that before, so maybe developing a schedule will be like based on they can interpret a syllabus and then develop a schedule based on the syllabus and the information they have for their courses. And if they have all of their courses syllabi in front of them, they can create like a whole bigger schedule that allows them to put everything that is due for all of the classes and help them succeed. So we have interpret collegiate syllabus, communicate effectively with faculty and support service staff, identify support services that can be helpful in their academic journey, and develop a time management strategy to succeed in their courses. Pretty good for a summer course, right? Okay, so let's go here. Okay. I'm trying to go back to, okay. So now the second step, determining the acceptable evidence, right? So you think about the assessment strategy, how you're going to evaluate. So this is whenever you're thinking about the activities that you're going to require your students to do, you need to think about the idea of formative and summative assessments, right? So formative assessments, I usually use this analogy because it can be really helpful. Is, if you're in my house and I'm cooking and I'm making pasta, the formative assessment is when the chef is tasting it. And like, even if you come into my kitchen and it's midway through the cooking process and I'm putting, the sauce together, it's like, hey, Vala, come here, have a little bit of my sauce. You're not going to be super critical of my sauce if it's missing salt, if it's missing, a little bit of seasoning, because you know that I'm not done, right? So you're going to provide me with a little feedback. So, hey, Hattie, I feel like it needs a little bit more season, needs a little bit of heat. Let's put a little red pepper flake, right? So that's the formative assessment. So those are things that usually are lower stakes activities that allow you to gauge how the students are doing throughout the semester and allow you to provide them with feedback so they can improve their performance. This is really, really good for student learning, particularly if you provide with timely feedback. If you create these and it takes like 3 weeks for you to provide with feedback, then it just defeats the purpose, right? So those are lower stakes, easy to do for you to provide feedback and gauge how they're doing. Now, the summative assessments, it's, you're putting the noodles on the table, like you're serving the meal, and people tend to be a lot more critical if it gets to their plate and the food doesn't taste very good, then they're a little more critical. Same thing, those are higher stakes activities. So it could be, a big project or presentation, and it could be, an exam, it could be, something that is just worth more points and there's more value. They tend to be, it could be cumulative, right? And you can have a balance between formative and summative assessment. So if you do have like a big project that is due at the end, my recommendation is for you to scaffold or break down that activity into smaller deliverables so that, they're not putting their efforts just at the very end for that thing that is worth a lot of the grade, but they are putting their efforts a little bit at a time. And you can provide them with feedback as they go. So when you're thinking about the acceptable evidence, is creating a good balance of the activities. So let's think about an assessment strategy that could work for this class. It's a summer course, right? So we don't want to have a lot of, let's think about a summer class that is going to be 1 month long, right? So we have 5 classes a day. And so let's think about what is something that is doable for products or evidence of their learning. We talked about creating a time management strategy, right? So how about they will create a master calendar with all of the assignments there for all of their classes? Would that be a good activity for them to create?
I think so. Maybe you could have them use oh, what is it called? I've used it before on my syllabi where it helps you calculate like how long a particular reading might take. So they could use
Like a
that tool.
workload calculator or something like a,
Yeah.
okay. So master calendar with all the due dates. We can use a workload calculator to calculate how long different activities will take.
That way they can plan their homework time, not just have a list of their assignments, but actually have an idea of what the workload should be week to
So
week.
how about the master calendar, right? Like one of the things that we wanted our students to do is to have that time management strategy to succeed in their courses. So the creating the master calendar, I feel would align with that student learning objective. So you're talking, okay.
And it would also, I mean, it would align with interpreter collegiate syllabus, right, to some extent.
Yes. How much At the percentage of the grade, how much should that be?
I would think this would be kind of interesting to do as a two-part project. So I
Okay.
don't know if maybe creating the calendar would be formative. I would like them to reflect on like what they're like maybe they can predict how much time they're going to need to study for your class, right? In the 4 weeks, and then
So
reflect on that.
how about this? The master calendar activity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's a group of things so that we can create this group and it's going to be a certain percentage of the grade, but we can have smaller activities kind of built in.
Right.
So we can kind of, even have some of the things that have to do with interpreting the syllabus and everything. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so because time management is important and it's one of the bigger activities, one of the things that I also recommend, if it directly relates to the overall objectives of the course and it requires a lot of time and cognitive effort, it should be worth more of the grade. Does that make sense? If you look at those
Definitely.
3 to 5 objectives that overall they directly correlate to that, they require a lot of time and cognitive effort, should be worth more of the grade. If they somewhat relate, because everything that you should do in your course should relate to those objectives. If they don't relate to those objectives at all, you should not be doing that in your class. It's like that is busy work that you don't want to grade and you don't want to give to your students, right? So if they have some relation, but they don't take a lot of time and don't take a lot of cognitive effort, then they should be worth less. So we could have like a master calendar activity that maybe is worth like 20% of the class, right? Because some of these are going to be, I'm going to be reviewing the syllabi and it's going to take a lot of time. Maybe they have like, 4 or 5 classes. And, if they're not using AI to do this, it's going to take some time for them to kind of compile it all. Uh, would 20% work potentially? So good question. So it could be that they have to identify faculty members for all of their courses and they have to send an email introducing themselves or something, and then I don't know. We are developing this course. It could be anything, right? I would say go with the objectives first, because then you figure out like what are the things that I can do to assess, because there are so many ways that you can assess something. So you need to figure out, okay, communication is important, right? So what am I evaluating? We just had a session, right, Kendall, with a faculty member, Lori Stevens from English,
Mm-hmm.
and basically talking about student email communications. Can you share a little bit about that session, Kendall, kind of the gist of the session? Because I think it's been a challenge of how students have been communicating with faculty, right?
Yeah. So one of the things we talked about was that we're not sure that students are getting clear guidance about what their communication with faculty should be. And for that session, obviously, it was particularly pertaining to email. So we're getting emails that are maybe very informal. They don't use the correct title. Maybe emails that read more like text messages, where you get like sort of 5 one-sentence emails with no punctuation, no subject line. Students aren't identifying themselves. They're kind of just assuming that you don't have other classes that you're teaching. Um, but also people are seeing very long, overly formal, sort of flowery emails that they suspect are from AI. And so that's frustrating too, because you have to read 2 or 3 paragraphs when a couple of sentences would work. So I think if we really want to prepare students for success, um, in a class like this, we would want to talk about like not only how do you send an email, because I think your idea about having them send an email to introduce themselves, like that's great. I think it would also be nice to have, how do you send an email asking a question about XYZ? How do you like, imagine, we can all imagine that we're having some kind of issue with the class and we want to ask for like make a particular ask of the faculty. Well, how would you go about doing that, right? Because then if you see you're getting sort of some rude stuff, or maybe there can be a little emotional manipulation sometimes, where you can nip that in the bud and say, no, it's fine to make an ask, but you have to make an ask in an appropriate manner, and this is what this looks like.
And then you can also include some peer reviews and activities, but
Exactly.
you can have like spend some time in class, you could spend a day in class. So you talk about communications, how to properly communicate when do an email, how to address a faculty member, how to address a professor, how to be communicating effectively, but also concisely so that the people are not having to sort through fluff, or
Right.
it could be, in class, you're learning how to communicate, but using an AI tool to kind of proofread your message to make sure that it's good, like the activities that later on you create to make sure that they're doing the assignments, to make sure that they're meeting the objectives. Like you can just do that later, but the thing is, we want them to communicate properly, right? We agreed here, us, the three instructors of this class, that communication is important. So we can then figure out, okay, if communication is important, let's talk about, how much that is going to be worth as part of the class. So we talked about, time management. So the master calendar activity could be worth 20%. Perhaps the effective communication set of group of things would be, I don't know, to 20% also the grade, right? The workload calculator activities could be worth, 15% or something. Um, and then you really figure out, right? Like I'm going to have this group of activities going to be worth 20%, 10%, 15%. We'll look at it, the total, that's 100. And you can even be more granular, like under the effective communication thing, we're going to do, email drafting or, office hours or whatever, like just have different activities under that you can be even more granular and figure out the point value for each of those activities. So then let's move on to the next thing in the interest of time. Then we're going to plan the learning experiences and the instruction. So there's a term called chunking, which is in brain theory is like breaking up the information into smaller pieces so that our brain can process the information. So same thing, like we know all of the things that we're going to cover. So how we're going to chunk the content so that it's manageable for the students to get the information, right? So in a summer class, you could have, chunk it into 4-week blocks, right? It could be week 1, we're going to be covering the umbrella topic of communications, or it could be, syllabus evaluation or this, dissection. And then the week 2, whatever, like you are going to be chunking by weeks, or it could be by sessions, right? So you have summer, 5 days a week. So you're going to have 20 classes. Oh, yes, right? So you're going to be saying like session 1 is going to be this, session 2 is going to be this, session 3. So you're going to be chunking and breaking that down, giving structure, giving organization so that the students know exactly what they will learn, what they expect to do throughout the whole course, and making the content accessible and digestible. Then you can be a little more granular. Once you do that, once you chunk, right, you're going to be thinking about the assessments that you developed and see where does it make sense for me to place these assessments within that chunking. So if I had a marker, right, I would have the overall objectives up top because they would be guiding everything that we'll do. I would have all the assessment strategies. And in fact, I would have arrows going to all of the assessments, make sure that they all connected into my overall objectives that I'm asking the students to do. Then I would have, all my chunks, the weekly modules or the different sessions, and every single topic that I was going to be covered for each of those weeks. So if I've decided to chunk by 4 weekly modules, I would have those 4 modules and the overall umbrella topics that will be covered for that whole week. Then I would place these assignments where they make sense. Okay, under those chunks, I would just place them in and see where it makes sense within that. Then I can also create objectives for the different sessions, right? And I can think about all the different subtopics that will be covered for the week. And then you follow the same process of creating those objectives and then creating the activity. Now, creating lesson plans, when you think about teachers, K through 12 instructors, that is something that is just so common. Like, it's just something that you do. And people in higher education tend to not use lesson plan as much, and I don't know why. Because creating lesson plans ahead of time really give you, the instructor, a structure by which to follow. Of course, if there's an activity and the students are really engaged, you can always kind of, be a little more flexible. But I always, when I teach, I always have lesson plans, because also it's a lot of work in the beginning to create those. But the next time that I teach the class, I already have a blueprint of what my class is going to be about. And then when I have my lesson plan, like if my class is 15 minutes long, it's like it starts at 11 a.m., like 11 to 11:50. I would say from 11 to 11:05, I'm going to do, housekeeping, introductions, and, I'm going to cover the objectives of the class. 11:05 to 11:15, I'm going to be lecturing on this topic. From 11:15 to 11:20, we're going to have an active learning activity that's going to be this. From 11:20, like you can really break it down so you stay organized and see what you're doing and seeing that you're staying on task. And I always have a section for notes. If something kind of an activity bombs or activity goes very well, or, there's a question that a student asks me and I don't know the answer, that I might need to, follow up later. I can just put that down. I can take a note on student participation. If I created an active learning strategy that is part of my formative assessment, I can evaluate the students and just put some notes on that. So, and then that gives me a blueprint, and I can make some tweaks so the class just becomes better and better and better, right? But overall, then the next time that I teach, I already know what I have to be doing for each of those sessions, and I don't have to rethink that stuff. And I used to do that too when I coached volleyball. For me, it's like I always had my practice plans too, and all those printed. I had it on a binder. And you know what? Sometimes, like, hey, my players are struggling with service eve, right? Like, I'm gonna go over service eve. Like, well, I have some drills that are already, figured out in the past, so I can just go back and look at some of the drills and just pull it, and I'll have to come up with this stuff from scratch. So it's always a good practice. So a lesson plan can be just as simple as a document with a timestamp, the activity, and then a place for notes. But you keep yourself organized, and it gives structure for the students. Everything that you do is planned, and everything relates to the overall objectives, our ghost overall objectives that we don't have the marker for here. Then I think this is it. Yeah. So on an ideal scenario, you will have that done before. Ideal scenario. Because then you can really, during the semester, focus on your students, focus on providing them with timely feedback, with responding to emails on time, like grading, right? Because it takes a lot to just grade and stuff. If you're also designing your class as you are grading, is just more work, right? So ideally, you would like to do that before. So as you've seen on the AI assisted course design class, one thing that can save you a lot of time nowadays is that if you do partner with AI in this whole course design process, will save you a lot of time. And I would say that in 1 week, you could have a full course planned with, everything down to a T, and rubrics, assignment instructions, everything. So everything is there. And then you might have to just, spend a little time putting that stuff in Canvas. But once you put that stuff in Canvas too, and you load rubrics and you load assignments and you load all the documents and you load all the activities and you have the lesson plan, everything, the next time you will teach that in the future, you will just copy that stuff over. So it is time consuming, but it saves you time in the future, right? So I would say ideally do everything ahead of time so that whenever class time comes, you don't have to worry about also designing what's going to come next. And then if you do that ahead of time, it's easier for you to align everything, you know?
But can novel depend on that one, right? Because let's say one of your sessions, there's a storm coming in, half is closed, everything should be shifted, like this session after, I don't like you need to split that specific session that is canceled to So, like writing at the very beginning, you cannot predict what's gonna happen like after a month.
You can't, but at the same time, one of the things that you can do, so there's different strategies to address a situation like that, right? Like, of course, like when COVID happened, that was a whole thing, right? Like it just disrupted everything. And of course, if you're planning activities that were designed for you to do in class, you have to just scramble and change it. So I think that extenuating situations can happen, but you can plan on things going well, right? Plan the course for like things are going to be going well. You can always shift things. You can always like if you have to cancel one class period, you just shift it, and you might not have to you might not cover others. And you have to make a decision as the instructor is like, what is the thing that I can remove, right? Or if it's something that you must cover, but you had to lose that class day because of a storm or something, or a snowstorm, you might create those materials and put it in Canvas and ask the students to access them asynchronously, right? So you might have to change the format or create content for that particular session that you are just adjusting and adapting for, than just having to rethink your whole curriculum in your whole course. Does that make sense? But I think that yes, situations do happen, but it would still be easier for you to just have everything planned down. It's okay, now I'm going to pivot. I'm not going to have that session because of the storm or because of whatever. And so I'm going to remove something else and then we're going to shift things. Then I haven't designed everything and I'm just going to go organically and like design as I go. I mean, some people do that, but those are the classes that you might not be as structured, right? And then you just, I'm not really sure where we're going to be covering. So different approaches. So the candle said chunky always makes me think of cottage cheese. It's like, you know what? For me, chunking makes me think of the Goonies because there was Chunk, the character. So, but I feel like the Goonies are now where I feel like the generation is, being people are not as familiar with the Goonies anymore. So I'm gonna have to find a different association for that. So, okay. Hi, hi. Okay, so I guess any other questions? Okay, okay, thank you. Well, thank you, Kendall.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, bye.
Bye.